What if I told you there is a commander that rewards you for playing big creatures by drawing cards, making mana, and gaining you life? This is the kind of value engine every commander player dreams about. Helga Skittish Seer. Helga is a 3 mana 1/3 frog druid in banned colors, and she has 2 fantastic abilities. Whenever we cast a creature spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater, we get to draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Helga. This ability alone already makes Helga a fantastic commander. She fills her hand, gains us life, and her body keeps growing over the course of the game. But it doesn't stop there. She has a second ability, which synergizes perfectly with the counters she gets from her first ability. We can tap Helga to add X mana of any color to our mana pool, X being Helga's power. We can only use this mana to cast creature spells with mana cost 4 or greater, or creatures with X in their mana cost. So what makes Helga this strong? First of all, she's a 3 mana commander. In this type of deck, we're aiming to cast her as early as turn 2. She ramps, draws us cards, and snowballs really fast if she's not dealt with immediately. We are in banned colors, so we have a ton of ways to protect Helga from removal, and we also have a ton of ways to untap her, so we can actually use her multiple times in one turn, which is where the value gets really crazy. There are a few different ways you could approach building Helga. First up, you can go the Hydra tribal route, really abusing the fact that most Hydra spells have an X in their mana cost. Another really popular way to build her is the +1/+1 counter strategy. In this type of deck, you just abuse the fact that it's really easy to get +1/+1 counters on Helga, and you can make her pump out a ton of mana really early in the game. And the third way, and in my opinion, the strongest way to build Helga, is a creature storm based deck. In this deck, we play a ton of value creatures who have really strong enter the battlefield effects. We play a ton of effects that untap Helga, so we can get multiple uses out of Helga in one single turn. This means we can tap Helga for mana, cast a creature with her, draw a card, we use some way to untap her, tap her again, cast a new creature, draw a new card, untap her, yeah. And it's just some sort of a loop effect where you can play a ton of creatures in one single turn, really abusing Helga's really powerful abilities. As per usual, we'll be going really in depth. I'll be going over every single card I included in the deck and explaining why I decided to include it. The video is divided up in 7 categories: the creatures, the copy and clone effects, acceleration, support cards, interaction, the lands, and a small combo section explaining the combos we're using in this deck. Let's start with the creatures. And obviously, every single one of them costs at least 4 mana. First up, we have Beast Whisperer, a really simple creature. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to draw a card. This synergizes perfectly with Helga, doubling up on our card draw. When you have both Beast Whisperer and Helga on the field, whenever you cast a creature spell with mana cost 4 or greater, you will get to draw 2 cards. As long as you can keep casting creature spells in this deck, you will never run out of cards. Breaching Hippocamp, a 4 mana 3/2 creature with flash. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, we get to untap target creature we control. With Helga on the field, you play this, you will get a Helga trigger, so you draw a card, get a +1/+1 counter on her. Breaching Hippocamp enters, you untap Helga, and you can just use her again. This card really replaces itself in this deck when you have Helga on the field. The fact that this card can be played on instant speed does have some good interactions in this deck, since we do play other creatures that also have flash. Meaning that when it's an opponent's turn, you can just flash this in, untap Helga, tap Helga for mana, and flash in another creature. Really fantastic card. Emil the Blessed. It's a 4 mana creature and we play it for its awesome activated ability. For 3 mana, we get to blink one of our creatures, meaning we get to exile it and then instantly return it to the battlefield under our control. As mentioned before, we play a ton of creatures that have really solid enter the battlefield triggers. With Emil, you can just blink them and get the trigger again. This is also a perfect way to protect Helga from single target removal. Someone targets Helga with a removal spell, you can just blink it and the spell will fizzle. He also has a second ability. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay 1 mana to make it enter with a +1/+1 counter. We don't really care that much about the ability, but if you do have some spare mana laying around, you can pump your creatures, I suppose. Emil is mainly used in some of our infinite combos in the deck, and I will be talking about that in the combo section later in the video. Falco's Spaga. a 4-mana 3/3 flying trample body. He enters the battlefield with a shield counter. A shield counter means whenever this creature would take damage, we can remove the shield counter and the damage will be prevented. If the creature would be destroyed for any reason, we can just remove the shield counter and the creature will survive. His passive ability allows us to look at the top card of our library at any time. He also allows us to cast spells from the top of our library if we remove a counter from a permanent we control in addition to the other costs. Helga will always have counters on her, so you can just tap Helga for mana, remove a counter, use the mana to pay for the card on top of your deck and just cast it. Basically, Falco makes it so that we play with one extra card in hand, being the top card of our library. Grand Arbiter Augustin IV, one of my personal favorite cards. It's a 4-mana creature and has 3 passive abilities. Our white and or blue spells will cost 1 generic mana less to cast. If a card you would cast is both white and blue, the cost will be reduced by 2 generic mana. These 2 abilities do stack. Recently, this card got added to the Game Changers list, and it is because of its last ability. As long as Grand Arbiter is on the field, every spell your opponents cast will cost 1 generic mana more. Most Magic players know Grand Arbiter and nobody likes playing against him since this effect is just so oppressive. Inga and Esika. This 4-mana creature gives all our creatures vigilance and the ability that we can tap them for mana of any color, but we can only use that mana on creature spells. In this deck we mainly play creatures anyways, so that restriction is irrelevant. Whenever we cast a creature spell and 3 or more mana came from tapping creatures for mana, we get to draw a card. This effect works with Helga, so if we tap Helga for 3 mana, use it on a creature spell, Inga and Esika will draw us a card. We'll mainly be using Helga's mana to cast creatures anyway, so this card will just draw us a ton of cards. Shalai, Voice of Plenty. It's a 4-mana flying creature and she gives us, our planeswalkers, and every other creature we control hexproof. This is a perfect way to protect your value creatures and Helga, just making them untargetable for your opponents. The fact that she also gives us as a player hexproof is really insane. People underestimate how many spells in a game of Commander actually target opponents or target players. Just try out Shalai in any of your decks and you'll really start to appreciate how good she really is. She also has an ability for 6 mana, we can put a +1/+1 counter on every creature we control. Later on in the game, if you do have a ton of mana left, you can just start pumping your board and setting up for lethal. Sparring Mummy. When this creature enters the battlefield, we get to untap another creature. Same reason as why we play Breaching Hippocamp. You can just use Helga to cast this. Helga will trigger, she will gain a counter, draw you a card, untap Helga again when this creature enters the battlefield, and you just get a second use out of her. This creature is basically free, just granting you a Helga trigger and allowing you to use her again. Timeless Witness, the more expensive version of Eternal Witness. In a Helga deck, it's actually a benefit that she costs 4 mana instead of Eternal Witness's 3 mana, since we do get a trigger out of her. Whenever it enters a battlefield, we get to return a card from our graveyard to our hand. Since we are in Bant, we don't play that much graveyard interaction, so later in the game, if one of your value spells is in your graveyard, you can just cast Timeless Witness and return it to your hand to cast it again. Or for example, if one of your important cards gets milled for some reason, this is a way to return it to your hand. When this card is in our graveyard, we can pay 7 mana to eternalize it, meaning we exile this card from our graveyard and then create a 4/4 zombie token copy of it. We will get the enter the battlefield trigger again and we will return a card from our graveyard to our hand once again. Perfect in the late game. Keep in mind, you can't pay for the Eternalize cost by using Helga, since Eternalize is an activated ability and not a cost of a creature card. Chakram Retriever, arguably the strongest card in the deck. This card is the reason I call this a creature storm deck. Whenever we cast a spell during our turn, we untap target creature. The synergy on this card with Helga is just insane. When you both have Chakram Retriever and Helga on the field, the game is just over. You can start playing your entire deck. You tap Helga for mana, cast a 4-mana creature, you will draw a card, you will gain life, Helga will grow, Chakram Retriever will trigger, you will untap Helga, enabling you to tap her again, cast a new creature, draw a new card. Yeah, the loop just keeps going until you run out of creatures. In most cases, when you both have Helga and this creature, the game will be over. It's already won. Tulane, Teller of Tales. Yeah, you knew he was gonna be in the deck. It's a 5-mana creature. Whenever we cast a creature spell, which we will be doing all the time, we get to draw a card and then put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped. Tulane is just a crazy card, especially in a creature-based deck. When you have both this and Helga, whenever you cast a creature spell, you will draw 2 cards and you can put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. On top of that, he even has an activated ability. For 3 mana and tapping him, we can return a creature we control to our hand. So if for some reason you do run out of cards or you have a creature with a really good enter the battlefield effect already in play, you can just tap Tulane, return it to your hand and then play it again, starting the value circus all over again. We also use Tulane in some of our combos, which I will be explaining in the combo section. If for some reason you really don't want to play our little cute frog as a commander, you can always go with Tulane. It will work just fine. Galadriel, Light of Valinor. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to choose one of 3 options. We can only choose each single one of these options once per turn. First option allows us to add 3 green mana to our mana pool. This is really explosive acceleration and most of the time you will just instantly be able to use this mana to cast another creature, getting more Helga triggers and getting another Galadriel trigger. Option 2, we are able to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. This is fantastic with Helga just growing her power, allowing her to tap for more mana, or just whenever you have a ton of creatures on the field, pumping them up even more, setting up for a game win. And the third option allows us to scry 2 and then draw a card. We can scry to the bottom whichever cards we don't need at this point in the game and we get to draw a card, which is always good. Mulldrifter, a 5 mana creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to draw 2 cards. I know, combined with Helga, this is already really crazy, but it gets even better. We can evoke it for 3 mana. Evoke means we can cast it for 3 mana. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it gets sacrificed instantly, but we will get trigger to draw 2 cards. Helga's ability and evoke work in a funny way. If you evoke for 3 mana, you still cast a 5 mana cost Mulldrifter, so Helga will trigger, even if you only paid 3 mana to evoke it. The synergy is just crazy. You will get a Helga trigger, you will get to draw 2 additional cards from Mulldrifter. Yeah, it's bananas. And for the exactly same reason, we play Nulldrifter, the Eldrazi variant of Mulldrifter. It's a 7 mana flying creature that has Annihilator 1, so we can perfectly cast it in the late game and start annihilating opponents whenever we swing with this. And it also has Evoke 3. For 3 mana, we can evoke this, draw 2 cards and get a Helga trigger, growing her, gaining us life and drawing us a 3rd card. Absolutely insane value on both Nulldrifter and Mulldrifter. Peregrine Drake, a classic card used in a ton of infinite combos. It's a 5 mana flying creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to untap 5 lands. It's basically a free creature. You can just tap 5 lands, cast Peregrine Drake and untap those 5 lands again. You will get a Helga trigger and you will not have spent any mana in theory. If for some reason all your lands are already tapped, you can just tap Helga if she's at 5 power, cast a Peregrine Drake and then just untap all your lands. It's an absolutely insane card once again in this deck. Basically a free creature that will grant you a Helga trigger. Obviously we also use this in some of our infinite combos, more about that later. Consecrated Sphinx. As you know by now, Helga will generate us a ton of mana, but we do need some ways to actually win the game. For 6 mana we get a 4/6 flying body. Whenever an opponent draws a card, we can draw 2 cards. When you play this and you go 1 round around the table, you will have drawn at least 6 cards of this creature. If Consecrated Sphinx is allowed to stay on the battlefield and doesn't get removed, it will win you the game. Trust me. It's a classic finisher creature in blue. Great Oak Guardian. It's a 6 mana creature with flash. Main reason why we play him is because once again it's essentially a free creature that will give you a Helga trigger. If you use Helga and or mana dorks to pay for his mana cost, you will just enter the battlefield, untap everything and you will be able to use the creatures again to tap for mana. And you will get a Helga trigger. Second reason is we can actually win games with this creature. If you have a ton of creatures on the battlefield, you can just play this, everything will get +2/2 and you can swing for lethal. We also have ways to bling this creature or bounce it to our hand and we can just keep playing this again and again and again with Helga, buffing our creatures to a really huge amount of power. Auto include in a Helga deck. Surak and Goreclaw. It's a 6 mana creature and he will also give all other creatures we control trample. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, he will put a +1/+1 counter on it and it will gain haste until the end of turn. This creature is an absolute game finisher. Every creature we play with this on the battlefield will get +1/1, get haste, so you will be able to swing immediately and will have trample, just creating a nightmare scenario for your opponents. As mentioned before, drawing our entire deck and playing all creatures in our deck is really easy to do with Helga. But as long as they don't have haste, we can't swing with them and win the game. That's why we play Saguk and Goreclaw. We just cast this creature first and everything that enters will get haste and trample, and we will be able to close out the game. Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. One of the classic big mana value creatures that will just turn the game around in your favor. For 7 mana, we get a 4/7 Vigilance Body. Every other creature we control will get +2/2, and every creature an opponent controls will get -2/-2. If you've ever played against Elesh Norn, you know how oppressive it is. Your opponents won't be able to have any tokens or mana dorks on the battlefield, since they will just die instantly against their -2/-2 static effect. In most games, your creatures will just be buffed up, opponents won't have that many blockers left, and you can just swing for lethal. Elesh Norn really turns the game around. And obviously, with Helga, a 7 mana creature is actually really easy to cast. Another classic big mana creature that's a win con is Hullbreaker Horror. For 7 mana, we get a creature that has flash and can't be countered. Good luck control decks. Whenever we cast any other spell, we get to choose one of 2 options. We can return a spell we don't control to the controller's hand, essentially semi-countering the spell, or we can bounce a non-land permanent to the owner's hand. Since we do play a ton of creatures with flash, whenever an opponent casts a spell, we can just flash a creature in, we cast a spell, so we can return it to its owner's hand with Hullbreaker Horror. If we just cast a ton of creature spells, which is the entire purpose of this deck, for each spell we cast, we get to bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. When you really storm off with Helga, just keep casting spells in a turn, you can bounce the entire board. Fantastic. Another big mana creature that is perfect to close out games is Koma Cosmos Serpent. For 7 mana, we get a 6/6 creature that can be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, we get to create a 3/3 Serpent token. Not just your upkeep, but every upkeep. So you play this, go 1 round around the table, and you will end up with 4 Serpent tokens. She has an activated ability where we can sacrifice one of the Serpent tokens she just created. When we do, we get to choose one of 2 options. First ability, we can tap target permanent, and the activated abilities of that permanent can be activated this turn. This is a perfect way to stop other people from comboing or generating value. The second option, and probably the option you'll be using most, sacrificing a Serpent will grant Koma indestructible until the end of turn. Koma is almost impossible to deal with. You can't counter it, and most of the time you can just grant it indestructible and it can be removed. This will stick to the battlefield and will generate you an army of Serpent tokens that you can just overwhelm your opponents with. Craterhoof Behemoth, the best finisher for any creature-based deck. For 8 mana, we get a 5/5 haste creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, all your creatures will get +XX, where X is the amount of creatures you control, and they will also gain trample. As you can imagine, this is really easy to cheat out with Helga once again, and we will always have a board full of creatures. Craterhoof is just an absolute insane monster. Even your smallest mana dorks will turn into immensely huge bodies with trample. Every single Magic player knows Craterhoof Behemoth and how brutal it can be. Or you don't play it and you lose against it, or you play it and it won you a ton of games. Tidespout Tyrant, one of my personal big mana creatures to close out games with. Whenever we cast a spell, we get to bounce target permanent to its owner's hand. Yeah, remember Hullbreaker Horror that said non-land permanent? Tidespout Tyrant actually bounces any permanent. When you resolve this and you just start storming off with Helga, just chaining a ton of creature spells, you can actually start bouncing every opponent's lands. You will be there in the late game controlling 10 lands and your opponents will have non-lands left. Actually a really fun way to end the game. For us, that is, not for your opponents. We can also use Tidespout Tyrant with some interactions in our deck where we bounce our own permanents to just keep casting creatures with Helga. And the last card in the creature section is Jin-Gitaxias. It's a 5/4 creature with flash that comes at the cost of a whopping 10 mana. But the effects are really worth the 10 mana. At the beginning of our end step, we get to draw 7 cards. So with Jin-Gitaxias on the field, your hand will always be full. And the effect why he really costs 10 mana, every opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. This means in their end step, every opponent will have to discard their entire hand, making them have to play every card they draw in a turn, that turn, or it will just be discarded. Really oppressive creature. If you really like this type of content, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon, so you get notified when I upload new videos. We also play a ton of clone and copy cards in this deck. They all are 4 mana creatures, so we will get a Helga trigger. We can use these to copy any of our value creatures, and some clones even allow us to copy Helga, meaning we will get double the card draw of Helga and double the amount of mana she generates. Naga Fleshcrafter, one of the new cards released in Tarkir Dragonstorm. It's a 4 mana clone creature that enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. You can even target your opponent's creatures with this. When it is in our graveyard for 3 mana, we can activate its Renew ability. We get to exile this card from our graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on target non-legendary creature we control. Every other creature we control becomes a copy of that creature until the end of turn. If, for example, we control a Hullbreaker Horror and some mana dorks, we can just exile this card from our graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on the Hullbreaker Horror, and every creature we control will become a copy of Hullbreaker Horror, meaning whenever we cast a spell, we get to bounce any non-land permanent. It's situational, but can generate you a ton of value. It's basically just a clone card with a situational upside. Phyrexian Metamorph. For 3 mana and 1 blue Phyrexian mana, we get a card that enters the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield. Most clone cards cost 4 mana, and this card basically gives us the same effect for just 3 mana and the cost of 2 life. Even if you pay the 2 life for the mana cost, this will still trigger Helga, because this card will always have a converted mana cost of 4. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. It's a 4 mana clone card that enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature we control. It also has a fantastic static ability. The legend rule doesn't apply to any permanents we control, meaning we can use this effect to copy one of our big legendary creatures like Elesh Norn, for example, and just having 2 Elesh Norn cards on the battlefield, which is absolutely insane. And we can also use this card to just copy Helga, giving us 2 copies on Helga, drawing us double the cards and generating double the mana. Fantastic clone card. It is one of the more expensive clones though. Sakashima the Imposter. It enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, but it will retain its name, meaning you can also copy legendary creatures with this card, and the legend rule doesn't apply to those 2, since this card will just retain its name. It also has the ability which it will retain if it copies another creature. For 4 mana, we can just return this card to our hand, meaning if we clone something with this and we want to reset the clone effect, just target someone else, we just pay 4 mana, gets returned to our hand, we can play it again and just copy something else. Another awesome clone card that doesn't care about the legend rule, and we can copy Helga or any other valuable legendary creature in our deck. Spark Double. It enters the battlefield as a copy of a creature or a planeswalker we control. In addition, when it is a creature, it will enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. If it's a planeswalker, it will enter with an additional loyalty counter on it. And the best part, once again, about this clone effect, when the copied creature is legendary, the legend rule doesn't apply to this clone, meaning we can copy Helga and even have the copy have an additional +1/+1 counter, generating 1 additional mana. Stunt Double. This is basically just a standard clone card, but with the benefit we can play it on instant speed, since it does have flash. This allows for some really fun interactions. You can instantly flash this in to copy an opponent's creature, one of your own value creatures, and yeah, opponents will probably never see this coming. Next up, we have the acceleration section. We do play a ton of 1 mana mana dorks just to fix our colors, and we really want to get Helga out on turn 2 to start generating value as soon as possible. Elvish Mystic, Evanescence Pilgrim, Llanowar Elves, Fyndhorn Elves. 4 classic 1 mana creatures that just generate 1 mana when you tap them. Perfect cards that allow us to cast Helga on turn 2. Birds of Paradise. 1 mana, 0/1 flying body, and you can tap this to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Perfect for color fixing or blocking really big flyers later on in the game. Delighted Halfling, a really power-crept Llanowar Elves. For 1 mana, we get a 1/2 body, and we can tap this to add a colorless mana to our mana pool. We can also tap this to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, which we can only use on legendary spells. If we do use this mana for a legendary spell, that spell can't be countered. Arguably the best mana dork there is. Noble Hierarch. It's 1 mana for a 0/1 creature that taps for any one of our 3 colors. So perfect for color fixing. On top of that, it also has the Exalted mechanic, meaning if we attack with 1 singular creature, it will get +1/+1 until the end of turn. We don't really care about the Exalted. That being said, in some situations, I suppose you can get a little bit more damage in with it. Utopia Sprawl, a 1 mana enchant forest card. As it enters the battlefield, we get to choose a color. Whenever the enchanted forest is tapped for mana, we also get to add 1 mana of the chosen color to our mana pool. Turn 1 acceleration. Everything is about getting Helga out on turn 2. For the same reasons we play Wild Growth. For 1 mana we get to enchant any land. Whenever that land is tapped for mana, we also get to add 1 green mana to our mana pool. Bloom Tender. A 2 mana mana dork. We can tap it and we will add 1 mana of each color among permanents we control to our mana pool. With Helga on the field, this 2 mana creature will always tap for 3 mana. Really solid value. And last up, Solemn Simulacrum. It's not really an acceleration spell, but it just made sense to put it in this category. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to search our library for a basic land card and put it into play tapped. Since this does cost 4 mana, it also triggers Helga. We have a ton of ways to bounce this creature, to copy this creature, and just double up on the awesome ramp effect. A really good way to get all the basic lands filtered out of your deck, so you won't draw basic lands later in the game. Whenever Solemn Simulacrum dies, we also get to draw a card. Next up, we have the support cards. These are cards that really make the deck work, but didn't fit into any other category. Ella Damri's Skull. For 2 mana, we get an instant speed spell that allows us to search our library for any creature card and put it into our hand. It's the most cost-efficient creature tutor in these colors since we're not in black. Obviously, since we are a toolbox deck, we do play some tutors, so we can just go fetch the perfect creature we need at that time in the game, or some of our combo pieces. We only play 3 tutors in this deck since I really wanted this deck to stay in the bracket 3 power level, which only allows us to play 3 tutors and 3 game changers. Kiora's Follower. This 2-drop creature allows us to tap it to untap any other permanent. We mainly play this to untap Helga and use her multiple times in a single turn. That being said, you can also look at this as a mana dork. You can just use it to untap a land, making it function as a 2 mana Llanowar Elves. Neoform, the second tutor card we play. When we cast Neoform, we have to sacrifice a creature. Then we can search our library for a creature card with the sacrifice creature's mana cost +1. The creature we then fetch will also enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. We do have a really interesting mana curve. We play mana dorks, which you can't sacrifice since we only play 1 and 2 drop creatures, and then we instantly go to 4 mana creatures. You really have to know the decklist you play to know which options you have to fetch with Neoform. So make sure to study your deck. And the last tutor we play is Eldritch Evolution. When we cast a spell, we have to sacrifice a creature. Then we can search our library for a creature with mana value X +2, where X is a sacrifice creature's mana value. Once again, this is just a fantastic creature. You can just sacrifice a creature you control to go look for one of your win cons or combo pieces. Really underestimated card in the commander format in general, if you ask me. Intruder Alarm, by far the best card in the deck. If you resolve this card with Helga on the field, you will probably win the game straight away. It's a 3 mana enchantment that says creatures don't untap during the untap steps. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you get to untap all creatures. This card is just ridiculous with Helga. You can tap Helga for mana to cast a creature spell. You will get a Helga trigger, draw a card, the creature enters, you untap Helga, tap her again, cast a creature, draw a card, creature enters, untap her again. It's crazy. This also applies to mana dorks. So if you have Helga and 5 mana dorks, whenever a creature enters, you will just untap all your mana dorks. With Intruder Alarm and Helga, you probably will be able to cast your entire deck as long as you keep drawing creatures. It's not an infinite combo, but with this and Helga, you will probably be able to cast at least 50% of your deck. And obviously, Intruder Alarm is used in a ton of our infinite combos. I will be talking about these later in the combo section. Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner, the only planeswalker we play in this deck. For just 3 mana, we get a 7 loyalty planeswalker, which is really hard to deal with if this comes down early. Her static ability allows us to draw a card whenever a creature with power 4 or more enters the battlefield. Not mana cost 4 like Helga, but power 4 or more. It's a nice added benefit when we play a high power creature, we actually get to draw an additional card on top of the card Helga will draw us. The reason why we play this is the -1 ability. If you just remove 1 loyalty from Kiora, we get to untap target permanent. Yeah, we will be untapping Helga a lot with this. All jokes aside, this is just fantastic. She allows us to untap Helga, drawing us additional cards, growing Helga, generating more mana to cast even more creatures. And whenever we cast a creature with power 4 or more, we get to draw a card. Fantastic planeswalker, and it's just an uncommon card. Sagit, Viper's Fang. This 4 mana creature gives all our tapped creatures Death Touch, meaning if we swing with creatures, they will be tapped obviously and they will get Death Touch, making combat an absolute nightmare for your opponents. Untapped creatures who we control will gain Hexproof. We do play some instant speed untap effects, and if someone targets Helga with a removal spell, we can just flash a creature in, untap Helga, and she will gain Hexproof, making the removal spell fizzle. And the best part about this card, for 1 mana and tapping it, we get to untap another creature we control, meaning we can just untap Helga and get more activations out of her in that turn. Or just untap Helga when she's targeted by a removal spell and make her hexproof. If you really want to support the channel and unlock even more value, I just launched my YouTube membership program. This will get you early access to videos I make and deck lists of the decks I make. You will get the ability to vote on what deck I will do a deck tech about next. You will get your name mentioned in the credits of the video, and you will gain access to exclusive chat rooms in the Panzer MTG Discord where you can talk directly to me to review your decks, for example. Next up, we have the interaction section. We're not directly a control deck, but Band has access to really awesome removal and counter spells. Even some creatures that counter spells whenever we play them, synergizing perfectly with Helga. Pongify, a 1 mana instant speed spell, and we get to destroy any creature. The owner gets a 3/3 ape token in return. An opponent just played a 12/12 Ur Dragon. For 1 mana, we get to turn it into a 3/3 ape creature token. Really efficient removal. Swords to Plowshares. 1 mana, instant speed, we get to exile a creature and the controller will gain life equal to the power. Life is irrelevant anyways, so just for 1 mana we get to exile any creature. Shore Up. This spell has 2 functions in our deck. When we cast it, we get to target one of our own creatures. It will gain +1/+1 until end of turn and we get to untap it. Meaning we can tap Helga for mana, cast Shore Up, her power will grow, she will be untapped, and we can tap her again to add even more mana to our mana pool, essentially granting us a double activation of Helga for just 1 mana. In addition, when we target a creature with this spell, it will also gain hexproof until the end of turn. So we can also use this to protect Helga or any other value creature we control from a spot removal spell. Arcane Denial. This 2 mana spell counters any spell. The controller of the countered spell will get to draw 2 additional cards in the beginning of their next upkeep. At the beginning of our next upkeep, we also get to draw an additional card. People have been asking me why I like Arcane Denial this much. Yeah, the main reason is just a spell that counters any spell, not just a non-creature spell or a creature spell, usually costs 3 mana. Arcane Denial counters any spell for just 2 mana. The fact that you give your opponent's card advantage in most cases doesn't really matter. If they play a game-ending spell like a game-finishing board wipe or whatever, you can just pay 2 mana, give them 2 cards, and they will not win the game anymore. Yeah, really underrated card in my opinion. Fierce Guardianship. I will keep repeating this. The cards that cost 0 mana whenever you control your commander are absolutely broken in my opinion. That being said, this is just way too good of a spell not to play. As mentioned, if we do control our commander, we can choose to pay 0 mana for this spell to cast it. And it counters target non-creature spell. Even for 3 mana, it's castable, but for 0, the value is just absolutely insane. You have to play this. Yeah, exactly the same reasoning. Flawless maneuver. 3 mana, all your creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. If you control your commander, you can cast this for 0 mana. This is just the perfect protection spell for Helga and your board. And honestly, really broken in my opinion. But it's just way too good not to play this card. Rampaging Yao Guai. For 3 mana and X, we get a 2/2 Vigilance Trample creature. It enters the battlefield with an additional X +1/+1 counters on it, so usually this will be way bigger than a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy any number of artifacts and or enchantments. The mana value of all the enchantments and artifacts combined has to be equal or less than the amount of mana we put into X. For example, if we cast this for 8 mana, X will be 5 and we will be able to destroy a total combined mana cost of 5 in artifacts and enchantments. This is perfect removal on a creature body that we can use to destroy problematic enchantments and or artifacts. Or we can also just destroy people's mana rocks. You will always have targets in a game of Commander. And it's also just a perfect mana sink for Helga. If we are able to generate a ton of mana with Helga, we can just cast this for a really big amount and destroy all artifacts and enchantments on the board. A really big Vigilance Trample body will always be really solid. Foundation Breaker, another creature that allows us to deal with artifacts or enchantments. We can cast it for 4 mana and it will just enter the battlefield as normal, or we can evoke it for 2 mana. Meaning this will get sacrificed instantly after it entered the battlefield. We will get the trigger, we will get to destroy an artifact or enchantment, but the body will get sacrificed immediately. Once again, if you evoke this for 2 mana, it still counts as casting a 4 mana creature spell for Helga. So this will always trigger Helga if you cast it normally or if you evoke it. Mystic Snake. Counter spell on a flying body. For 4 mana, we get a 2/2 flying body with flash, so we can play it on instant speed. Whenever Mystic Snake enters a battlefield, we get to counter target spell. Meaning we can just flash this in. If someone casts a spell we don't like, we get to counter it, and we get a Helga trigger and the 2/2 flying body. Really good. Another counter spell on a body, Overcharged Amalgam. It's a 4 mana 3/3 flyer with flash. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can exploit, meaning we get the option to sacrifice a creature. When we do, we get to counter target spell, activated or triggered ability, functioning in the same way as Mystic Snake. The fact that you can also counter activated and triggered abilities is really insane. Let's say someone plays a creature with an ETB effect that will win them the game, we can just flash this in, sacrifice a creature and counter the triggered ability, and they won't win anymore. This card will really surprise your opponents. Subtlety. For 4 mana, we get a 3/3 flyer with flash. When this enters the battlefield, we get to target creature or planeswalker spell that's still on the stack, and the owner gets to put it on top or bottom of their library, essentially countering it. Another sort of counter card on a creature body with flash. We can also evoke this by exiling a blue card from our hand. Meaning when we have this in our hand, we can just exile a blue card. This will enter the battlefield and leave instantly, but we do get the enter the battlefield trigger. What's really insane about these exiling evoke cards is when you exile a blue card and evoke this, you will get a Helga trigger since you just cast a creature spell with mana cost 4 or more, which is absolutely insane. You just get the awesome ability of this creature plus a Helga trigger for 0 mana. Crazy. Vansix, another creature with flash. When it enters the battlefield, we get to return target spell that's still on the stack or a permanent to its owner's hand, meaning we can use him to bounce problematic permanents that are on the battlefield or bouncing spells that are still on the stack, semi-countering him once again. We also use Vansix as one of our combo pieces. Sister of Silence. For 5 mana, we get a creature with flash. When it enters the battlefield, we get to counter target instant or sorcery spell or activated or triggered ability. Countering activated and triggered abilities on a body with flash is really good and will really surprise your opponents. Compared to Overcharged Amalgam, this card doesn't have exploit, so we don't even have to sacrifice a creature for the really good effect. Smirking Spelljacker, probably one of the more fun creatures in this deck. Once again, it's a creature with flash that functions as like a semi-counter spell. When it enters, we get to exile target spell an opponent controls that's still on the stack. When we exile it, it won't resolve anymore, so it's basically countered. Whenever we attack with Smirking Spelljacker, if a spell was exiled with it, we get to cast a copy of it without paying the mana cost. Even on a simple card like a Cultivate, this is insane. Whenever you attack, you just get to cast a free Cultivate. And there are so many other fun and crazy interactions this card has. It's truly a joy to play and discover all the possibilities. Solitude, a 5 mana flash lifelink body, and whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to exile target creature. The creature's controller will gain life equal to its power. So it basically functions as a Swords to Plowshares, but on a creature body with flash. Excellent removal attached to a creature. Once again, the best part about this card, we can just evoke it by exiling a white card from our hand. Meaning we essentially can cast it for 0 mana, we will get a Helga trigger since the mana cost is 5, and we will get the awesome removal ability. This 0 mana evoking creatures thing is just crazy. And the last card in the interaction section is Transcendent Dragon. Another awesome new card we just got in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, we get to counter target spell, just functioning as another counter spell attached to a creature. But this time it has an upside. If we do counter a spell this way, we get to exile the spell, and then we are allowed to cast it without paying the mana cost. Just imagine someone casts a Crater Hoof Behemoth for 8 mana trying to win the game this way. We just flash in Transcendent Dragon, the Crater Hoof gets countered, and then we get to cast our own Crater Hoof Behemoth. Insane. Before we get into the combo section, I will be going over the lands we play in this deck. Since Helga has a really low mana cost of only 3 mana and is in 3 colors, we have quite the expensive mana base. I wouldn't recommend playing this deck on a cheap mana base, since Helga will just come down way too late and it won't have the same tempo as you will have with a more expensive mana base like this one. Minamo, School at Water's Edge. We can tap this for a blue mana, and if we put 1 blue mana into it and tap it, we get to untap target legendary creature we control. This land is absolutely broken with Helga. Bridgeworks Battle. For 3 mana, we can give target creature we control +2/2 and make it fight target creature we don't control. This is an excellent removal spell since we play a ton of big creatures, and we can also use this to boost the power of Helga. So we can target Helga, remove someone's creature, and then we can tap her for +2 mana since we just boosted her power. The backside of this is just a land that taps for green, and we can make it enter untapped for 3 life. Witch Enchanter, a 4 mana 2/2 creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Another 4 mana body that we can use to trigger Helga and deal with problematic artifacts and or enchantments. Backside is just a land that taps for white mana. If we pay 3 life, we can even make it enter untapped. Disciple of Free Allies. It's a 6 mana creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we have to sacrifice another creature. When we do, we gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Later on in the game, this is just fantastic. If we have a creature that has an ETB effect already entered the battlefield, it doesn't really have that much use anymore. We can just sacrifice it to discard and draw a ton of cards. It doesn't really have a downside anyway, since the back of this card is just a land that taps for green, and by paying 3 life, it even enters untapped. We play 2 Pathways, 3 Pain lands, 3 Shock lands, all 3 Fetch lands, 3 of the Bond lands, 3 Fast lands, 2 of the Horizon lands, City of Brass, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, a Triome, Mana Confluence, 4 Forests, 2 Islands, and 1 Plains. Last up, we have the combo section. We run a small creature-based combo package. All creatures in these combos are really good in their own. We just need to add 1 piece to make it go infinite. For the first combo, we need Peregrine Drake and Emil the Blessed on the battlefield. We also need at least 4 lands that can produce mana. We tap all 4 lands for mana, and we use 3 of that mana to activate the ability of Emil, targeting Peregrine Drake. Peregrine Drake will leave the battlefield, enter the battlefield again instantly, untap up to 5 lands, we tap him again, activating Emil again, blinking Peregrine Drake, and in this process we will always net 1 mana. This combo will generate us infinite mana and infinite enter the battlefield triggers from Peregrine Drake. For the second combo, we need Intruder Alarm on the battlefield, and creatures we control have to be able to produce at least 5 mana. You can also have Helga at 5 power, and this is also fine, since she will produce 5 mana. And we need Venser in hand. We activate all our creatures, generating 5 mana in the process, and we cast Venser. Venser will enter the battlefield and trigger both himself and Intruder Alarm. First, we will resolve the Venser trigger, targeting himself, bouncing him to our hand. Then we resolve Intruder Alarm and get to untap all our creatures. Then we can just keep repeating this process, casting Venser for an infinite amount of times. With this and Helga on the field, we will get infinite Helga triggers and infinite mana. This way we will be able to draw our entire deck and close out the game. That's it for my in-depth Helga Skittish Seer deck tech. Helga really has everything I love in a commander. It's explosive, generates a ton of value, it's creature based, incredibly fun to play and learn the deck, and it is a cute little frog in the command zone. If you like these videos and really want to help out the channel, share this video with your entire family so they know what deck you'll be building next. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification. I upload one of these in-depth deck tech videos every single week. I will see you in the next one. Peace.